of the Transform Europe webinar series, Meeting the Left. We are excited having today Arnaldo Otegi, leader, general coordinator of the Basque party Bildu with us. But before introducing Arnaldo, I would like to provide you with some technical instructions. First, the interview will be conducted in English and Euskarian, and you have to choose the interpretation, which is simultaneous interpretation. In order to doing so, you must choose the language on the planet icon at the bottom of your screens. If you prefer to follow this event in Euskarian, please choose Spanish language. I'm afraid that this is provided in this way by Zoom. But anyway, to follow Euskarian, you need to choose the Spanish language here. If for English, of course, you do the same thing with the English button, and you have to mute the audio, the original audio. I am Baier. I'm an economist based in Vienna. I'm the political coordinator of Transform Europe, which is a research and educational network associated with the Party of the European Left. Together with my friend and colleague Elena Beloki, who is an anthropologist, a journalist, and director of the international department of the IRAZA Foundation, I will moderate this event. After the first part, in which Elena and I will interview Arnaldo, there will be a second part in which the audience is invited to ask questions. For doing so, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your controls. Send us your questions. We will collect them and present them to Arnaldo. I must say we must terminate this session latest by 7:15 p.m. So if there were many questions, it could easily be the case that not all of them can be presented to Arnaldo. Please consider also the possibility to like questions of others. That would mean then that they would, so to say, strengthen and appear on the top of the list of questions which we collect. You can also use the chat box if you want to comment on the discussion, introduce yourself, or share links with others. The event will be published. It will be recorded and published on our website, where, by the way, you also can find the previous webinars. But now, let's come to the really important part of the event. Arnaldo, I welcome you very warm-heartedly here in our webinar. Hi, very nice to have you with us this afternoon. Arnaldo is the general coordinator of the EH Bildu, which is the broad, left-orientated, pro-independentist, pro-sovereignty party of the Basque country. He got involved in the struggle for democratic rights and Basque under Franco's dictatorship. He was forced to exile in France, was handed over to the Spanish authorities, which imprisoned him and tortured him. Altogether, Arnaldo spent 11 years of his life in prison. In 1995, he became elected member of the parliament of the Basque Autonomous Community and was involved in all attempts of finding a solution to the Basque-Spanish conflict. And last not least, Arnaldo Otegi holds a university degree in philosophy and literature, which is also not very usual for top politicians. But anyway, it's also a characteristic feature of his very interesting personality. Unusual to how we structure the debates in this webinar, I would like to start the conversation with Arnaldo by asking him to provide us with some insight about his party, which is a big party, which is an important party, and we would be curious to know a little bit more about its history and the current challenges it copes with.
Yes, of course. Let me first of all say good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me here. It's great to be able to discuss and share ideas. I think that's essential and paramount. Let me summarize what wing. But there's a whole range of left-wing parties, and we, as EH Bildu, we are a part of the Social Democrat, Socialist and Communist sector, so to say. So we are together because we have the same project, a common project to all of us. And let me make a point and say that, the left, unfortunately, when we went to school, we only learned subtractions and divisions, not additions and multiplication. And that's what we need to learn. What have we done to achieve that goal? Well, we've created a common house, which is still unfinished. And we've worked around an anti-oligarchic and a program for the people. And then we have this idea that is common to all of us, and we defend sovereignty of our people because we believe that sovereignty is a tool for us to make different policies. That's what EH Bildu is all about. We want to add and multiply.
Please.
This is a practical. Good afternoon, Arnaldo. You mentioned the wing coalition. We've seen that thanks to the increased importance of EH Bildu, the current president was elected and appointed. We see that you've signed 2 labor reforms, and we've also remarked that EH Bildu has given a good push to left-wing policies. So currently, what do you expect from the Spanish government, and what type of relationship do we have at EH Bildu with the Spanish government? Well, we've had to make a very special discussion because this is a special situation. Yesterday we came to an agreement. We signed an agreement with both Unidas Podemos and the Socialist Party that is in power for a new labor reform. And we believe that we need to adapt that reform to our situation and not apply it to the whole of the Spanish state. Well, of course, there are some points we don't agree on with the Spanish government. Nevertheless, we have signed this agreement. We've supported this, we've voted for this government, but we don't support it. But we are engaged against the anti-authoritarianism. And this is why we thought that this government could open a new window to a different type of policies being implemented. And yes, you are right when you say that we helped Pedro Sanchez become president. But let me summarize things. We said, okay, what do you want to do? And are you going to be counting on us for that or not? And we talked to him in three different areas. First, a democratic solution to national problems. The Spanish state has a structural crisis around territory, and we believe we need to face that. We need to find a structural solution to that, and for that we need to accept the right to self-determination. In the social scope, neoliberalism has implemented many cuts, and we need to get back our powers and adapt those to provide solutions to that situation. And thirdly, concerning peace, we believe that we need to provide a structural solution to Basque political prisoners. So we've opened a window, so to say, with this new government. We are in touch with them. And now, what are our expectations? We don't have high expectations, but we believe that at least we have that direct line, that hotline with the government. And we tell the government, we don't want you to be a cosmetic government, left-wing government. From the Second Republic, now we've never had such a government at a national Spanish level, and that's good. I mean, that leads to interesting expectations, but they need to be fulfilled, of course. And we believe that right now, those expectations are not being fulfilled. We have a good relationship with both with the PSOE, the Socialist Party, and Unidas Podemos. But, you know, in politics, you need to tell people things in a very simple way, and you need to be able to answer those questions. What you want to do and who you're going to be doing that with. Concerning the national problems or the cuts that have been implemented, well, we're going to be working together. Well, we can work together, why not? We're ready to walk down that path, but we are still very skeptical about it, of course.
Thank you very much, Arnaldo, for this insightful explanation of the current situation in your country. I'm tempted to dive deeper into Spanish domestic politics, but I think that the European audience also would be keen to learn a little bit about the sanitary crisis in which we all are involved at the moment. It seems that in the most of the European countries, also the right time to start evaluating what happened. What do you think? Did the member states, the European institutions, the international institutions, the European Commission, the European Council stood the test? And what do you believe are the lessons which we have to draw from the sanitary crisis?
Well, I insist many times in my talks and conferences that sometimes in life you win and sometimes you lose, but that you can always learn. And I think that right now we have learned some lessons. First of all, from the very beginning, we've been saying that this is a very extraordinary situation. It's like a black box, right? An event that occurs, a virus comes and puts everything upside down, and the world changes as a consequence of that. And we all need to place ourselves before that. And we've said from the very beginning that this is not just a health crisis. This is also a social crisis and an economic one. and an urgent crisis at all levels. Secondly, we believe that this crisis will accelerate some already existing crises. And it will accelerate the challenges we were already facing. Concerning the role of the EU, what can we say? Well, I believe that in poetic political terms, we could say that we need to look at the Russian planning of support. We need to look at the Chinese support that's been sent over to the US. And we see that there are also Cuban doctors working to help in Italy. What does it all tell us? It means that the EU has collapsed. On the one hand, because we as states, we need to defend and protect ourselves. There's been a healthcare material crisis, and there's something that for us has been very telling. Financially or economically, you see that beyond the economy or the finance, there's nothing. We don't have any European project as such. And this is what explains the rise in far-right supporters as well. So one, we need a new type of Europe. Two, we need to support the public system more than ever. And thirdly, we need to protect people from the state, and we need to face authoritarianism, because in my opinion, it's gone up, it's on the rise, because it provides very simple recipes, and the left has to face them in a very clear way. And this is what we need to do. We need to speak without complexes. That world suggested or defended by neoliberalism is not working. We've already seen the limits of the system, and I think it's a good time to quote Garcia Linera: people are ready to listen to different things, to assume different things. And I think that there's a good opportunity for the left right now, because we believe that some ideological battles that were long lost are still there on the table, but we cannot expect much from this EU. It is a shame to all of us, because each one is trying to save themselves individually. So what we see is that we don't have a solid European project. And I would add that the people who invented that EU at the time were like, you know, they were facing the Soviet Union at the time somehow. And now we have a different context. If you look at leadership all over the world, I think the cultural and intellectual and political level of it is so poor that somehow we do have an opportunity from the left to get back our narrative and to show the world in a different way. I think it is getting more and more urgent to provide alternatives to the people in the short term. And we need to tell the people that if we go on in this direction, our planet has no future. It's as simple as that. And I think that morally and politically, we need to say that from the left. We need to tell people what the situation is and looks like and what alternatives could be. I don't know if electorally that is going to be working, but we need to say it, because otherwise no one is going to be telling them about that. And we have that moral need. There are many crises on the table right now, and our future is at stake. We need to face that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Arnaldo. Mm, there is now a widespread and a new appreciation of the work carried out by healthcare workers and employees in the welfare systems. Most of them women. We really thank them for everything they've done. They are now regarded by the people as the real heroes of the moment. People are very thankful to them. We've heard people applauding welfare workers. Many people seem now to recognize the importance of sufficiently funded public services. This is something we're all feeling. And the question is, can we expect that in the wake of the pandemic, the tides will be turning against austerity and against neoliberalism? I think that all crises are good opportunities, and I think that in that sense, there are some totems that have collapsed. Margaret Thatcher said that the society was dead and that we are only individuals. Well, I think that this crisis has shown that a virus is capable of changing the world and stopping it, and that is huge. That is a huge event, socially speaking. And let me put on my philosopher's hat here. We are in shock. We've realized that we are mortals. We've realized that the system doesn't give any guarantee to us. And we've realized two things: that individually we cannot face this, that we need to face this crisis collectively. And secondly, it's made a sector more visible, a sector, a field that is made up mostly by women, like healthcare workers, workers in supermarkets, cleaners, etc. And we are now fully aware of the fact that we need them. People applaud them, and that's fine by me, but they are part of the community. They also need the community to support them emotionally, of course, but we need to get back a healthy and a strong and solid health system. We need working conditions. And in my view, I see one challenge there. Normally, when there is a situation of lack of guarantees and safety, people become very open to very simple recipes, which are only good for the right-wing parties. So the left needs to connect to the people, needs to provide something sure to the people because they feel uncertain. And the left needs to tell them that we have an alternative that is safe as well. And this gives us a good opportunity to struggle, to fight ideologically. I think that this is a good time for us to tell the people that we can protect them. I mean, from now on, it's going to be very hard to tell people that we're going to be cutting the funding for health services. It's going to be hard to transmit that to the citizens. So privatization is not the right way. Sometimes we think that we may need more civil servants, but I don't mean that. We need to provide a good service that is not under the control of the public administration, but rather controlled by the people, by the citizens, right? That's what I mean by that. Let me finish by saying that this is a good time for that, because we believe that in a situation of crisis, neoliberals become socialists. And now they are asking for money from the public administration. And some business people are saying that they need that funding, and maybe public banking is necessary. So we cannot all become socialists whenever there is a crisis, right? That's not the way. And this is why I'm saying that there is a huge opportunity here for us, because our values are being highlighted more and more, and people are realizing more and more that they were living in a situation that was not sustainable, that was not safe, and I think that we are all in a shock, and that can only be good for the left, because this is a good project right now. It's always been a good one.
Thanks for this. I want to remain a moment with the question of Europe. Common sense would have told us that a crisis of such a huge impact on actually the whole humanity would be the moment of international solidarity, or at least of European solidarity. And as you mentioned rightly, this was not the case. Indeed, it were the member states who responded. In some way, they responded reasonably. At the same time, it was also the moment in which some of the member states of the European Union decided to close borders, to blame refugees for the sanitary crisis. There were even ugly situations when it came to the export of medical equipment, which was forbidden by some countries. And if this logic prevails, the obvious result will be that we will see that the means which different states in the European Union can apply are very different. Thus, you could, in this sense, feel that the pandemic and even more the economic crisis we are heading to will accentuate the inequalities among the member states in Europe. And this raises the question, what is the perspective of European integration, given the shameful failure of the European institutions in correctly addressing the huge problem of the sanitary crisis and, of course, the looming economic crisis. What's your take on that? What might happen to European integration under these very particular and not positive circumstances?
Well, I think this is a huge failure. It's been a failure at a European level for some time now, because at a European level, a direction has been taken that was leading nowhere, really. The governance model is not a very democratic one. On the one hand, it's a very vertical one, and the interests of the different states are defended and supported. The only factor that is common to the European project is the economy and the financial perspective. So that's something that is now very visible. At the time when the EU was created, even if those pioneers were right-wing politicians, well, they did have a common perspective, and that's why I'm saying that. Well, they were facing at the time the Soviet Union, and there was a very specific situation at the time, and they had to carry out a very strong intellectual effort to implement a very specific type of policies, but that's over. And we've realized that there's only capitalism and neoliberalism. So if you place money at the core of the project, and when money becomes the only value upon which everything else is built, then we see many interesting things. I know that a Basque company had already bought some masts in China, and then a different European member state went to this supplier, offered more money, and they kept the masks. And this is a piracy story. And what happened in Italy, for instance, many people have burnt European flags in Italy because they don't feel protected anymore. And let's be very careful with this, because the far right uses all these very well. They know how to use that for their own interests. So we need a different type of Europe. And we need to analyze that situation. We need to look at the whole planet. And the COVID-19 has given us a chance to stop and think. And if we stop and think, there are many things that are happening that have never, ever happened again. There is a climate crisis going on for the first time, ever. And for the first time, we are questioning as species our way of living and working. That's never happened before. Secondly, there's something else that's going on, and that to me is also very interesting, and that's related to that rise in authoritarianism. The middle class, or what people think as middle class, because there are people that see themselves as being middle class, class that is in the middle, in between, right? But which may not be a real middle class. And in any case, there's been a drop in the living conditions of that middle class. And for the first time, we see that our offspring are going to be having worse living conditions than us. That's never happened before. And the third crisis we're facing is before authoritarianism and fake democracy. Democracy has been stolen from us. There are many sectors that make decisions that are not candidates in an election, right? And there's also another crisis that we've never seen before. Right now, we could have a hegemonic military power that is no longer so. And that's never, ever happened before. So, in this context, what do we need? We need to put all these challenges on the table, and we need to provide a deep answer. And for that, we need a totally different project based on workers, based on life, based on the climate, on languages, on research, on women. I believe that is the main challenge. And if we don't face that, someone else will, and they will take a different direction we're not going to be liking. Thank you very much. Let's move on. Many economists expect a deep recession in the wake of the pandemic. And in addition to this, there are many signs that it will not be a normal slump, which after a while followed by an upturn would allow a return to normality, to the normal situation. There are millions of precarious jobs, a huge youth unemployment rate in many European countries. The environmental crisis is still looming. The European economies will have to transform the manufacturing and service industries due to the digitization process. So this is a huge challenge. In your opinion, how can the enormous amounts of funds be raised, those funds that we need, that are required for the recovery and restructuring of Europe's economies? How can those funds be raised? Because we tend to say that workers are not going to be paying this crisis. So where will the money come from? Well, I think that only recently we had to face a crisis, and we've said this in public over and over again. We're not going to be paying for this crisis, but this is what they plan us to do. That's going to be at the core of the far right and right-wing parties' plans. We are a small economy that represents or that is important in the industrial sector. And we say many times that the left needs to think in the short term, but also in the long term. If we look at the short term, we need a plan, right? To stand up again, to move on. And I will simplify things by saying that we're going to be having less funds from the public administration, and we're going to be spending more. So before that, there are two possibilities. One, okay, we're going to be cutting funds more and more, and we need to adapt to less funding, or we're going to be increasing our income and place or spent in different ways. So this is, again, the typical discussion between left and right. Mm-hmm. And we have provided some solutions, like, for instance, a COVID tax. Because now here and in many countries, I guess that many people will start saying that all together we're going to be working and moving on. Yes, of course, we're going to be having to work together, but those who have the most will have to pay the most. And huge and large companies need to pay more. And if they don't, well, according to our calculations in this small country of us, the small shops and bars are going to be closing down, about 25% of them, according to our calculations. We have two large companies that work in aeronautics and manufacturing, and they're going to be hardly hit by this situation. So we say, okay, you need to look in the short term and think what you need to get out of this crisis. But you also need to think where you want to be in 10 years' time, because there you need to think about digitization. We have a revolution we're going to be having in the car industry. So in order to change this model, you have a good opportunity right now. We defend that, we support that. But I will finish by saying that we need to strike a balance between the short and the long term. And we, from the left, we have a moral duty. Why? Because we traditionally have thought that in the short term, we can go for the Keynesian model, and we're going to be saying, okay, we need to buy, consumers need to buy, and we will get out of this situation like that. Okay, that's for the short term, but at the same time, we need to be telling the people that we need to carry out a moral and ethical reflection here. Okay, that will be good for the short term, but only for the short term, because it doesn't have a future. That will place the planet at risk. And so we need to think at both levels. Where are we going to be getting the funds from? Well, from the places where they are, from the COVID tax, from tax shelters, etc., etc. And then we need to set priorities about where we're going to be spending that money, on high-speed trains, or maybe on the people, or maybe on a more solid public service or health service. Well, we need to think about that. And I support Pepe Mojica when he says that, of course, we can get out of this and stand up, but when we stand up, we need to think where we're going to be heading for. And this consumerism-based system has no future to it. We need to say that loud and clear. It's not sustainable to have families that have 3 cars in a household. We cannot go on supporting this model. It's not sustainable. It needs to be changed. I know we need to be patient. Of course, everything I'm saying is not very interesting in an election, maybe, but I have this permanent concern about daily politics, because we tend to concentrate on communication. And we need to get back politics with a capital P. Politics need to provide people's daily problems. And we also need to be telling people that we need responsible people, responsible communities. And we also need to be fully aware of the fact that we need to have a different model in the future. And this is our goal. This is our mission. I insist. This might not be very nice, a very nice message to convey in an election. Well, but it's a message we need to convey. We need to tell people the truth. We need to say, okay, we're going to get out of this. Maybe we're going to be poorer. We're going to be having less rights. We may stand up in the end, but if we keep basing our model in the same values, we won't have a future. On May the 1st, on our manifesto, we stated that we need, if we are to rebuild what was in the past, there will be no future. And I think that that's a good summary.
Thank you very much. After this voyage through so many aspects of contemporary socialist, communist, and left-wing politics, I would like to finish this first part of our conversation by asking you a question concerning the left in Europe. What do you think is the actual role which the left in Europe can play? And to be more concrete, which form of alliances you see are possible now in the Corona crisis, in the post-Corona crisis period, and which form of cooperation among the left-wing forces in Europe you think should be put in place?
Well, I come from a very classical type of culture, right? In my time, things were different. And people say more and more that things, or that times have changed. Yes, I agree that there are things that have changed. We started this conversation by presenting EH Bildu to you. And I told you that we need to learn how to add and multiply, right? And we are just an experiment of that in Europe. The Social Democrats, the Communists are together here. They have a single project, a common project. I think that the left in this context has no right to work on subtraction and division. Why am I saying this? Well, in the past, we would say that it was socialism or chaos, right? Maybe that's not the dilemma right now, but we are fully aware in the left that this is a huge challenge to all of us. We mentioned climate change, authoritarianism, far right, migrants, wars. All those elements are there, of course, and we need to face those challenges united from the left. We need to agree on a minimum level. Let's not waste much time discussing about our differences. Let's think, what is the minimum we can agree upon? Self-determination right of people, climate change, feminism. I've mentioned self-determination, struggle against authoritarianism, the defense of peace, and also a progressive anti-oligarchic project. I think all those points are meeting points, converging points to all of us in the left. I think that a lack of unity is not something we can afford now. I've always called to unity. I've never been interested in differences. What I'm saying is, if we want to be consistent, we cannot tell people that life is at stake on the planet and not be consistent with that. We cannot tell them one thing and do a different thing. So my reflection is, okay, let's join forces around what? Well, a minimum project that is common to all of us. And I think that's something we need to do in Europe and in the whole world. It is necessary, it is a must. And I defend that very, very much. I think that is something we need to do, absolutely. And I insist, we need to agree on a minimum level, because we are going through a very hard situation. And I think that such minimum project will be a revolution in itself. We need to face authoritarianisms, neoliberalism, and I think that in Europe there's much we can do together. We need to come up with a common space for the left.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We don't have much time left, so we're going to now start the second part of this interview, if that's all right with all of you. I would like to inform our participants that you have a Q&A icon at the bottom of your screens. That's where you need to go to write down your questions. I remind you that this interview will be ending at 7:15. So now we have time to take all the questions you write on that chat. Remember that we have that time limitation, and we'll be very happy to take as many questions as we can from you. So without further ado, I will now give the floor to Andoni, who is going to be moderating this part. Thank you. Well, I've already taken some questions. Since we don't have much time, I am going to be prioritizing, if you would agree. There's one question, a very specific question, on whether in the Basque Country there have been beneficial measures taken for the workers, and if so, which measures are those? Well, you know that we are a national community within that is divided between two states, the Spanish and the French states. And in the Spanish states, we are in two different autonomous communities, in the Basque Country and in Nafarroa. So we have the status of autonomy. You know that? That means that we have some powers, many powers, but there are many others that are very much limited for us. There are in the Parliament of Navarre and in the three parliaments of the three territories of the Basque Country some measures that have been made that have not been adopted by the Basque government, and they have been taken to a national court. When that happens, automatically everything stops and those measures lose their strength, right? There's one I remember now, I would like to share with you, which is a law on housing. We passed a law on housing that included something that was essential to us, which is a subjective right to housing. What we mean is that we're all entitled to a house. And not just that, but that it states that the public administration needs to guarantee that right. So the Spanish government has taken that law to court and it's not therefore implemented. We have now set up a committee to work on that. And we are now defending a path towards a constituent process. And concerning, well, we know that there are some points there that the Spanish government will not support, like for instance, the housing law, a minimum wage, etc., etc. So the power relations between that we have in the Basque Country and the power balance that we have at a national Spanish level is different, right? In all three Basque provinces, we have a majority from the left, and most trade unions defend sovereignty. That's the situation in the Basque Country. What does it mean? It means that the power relations are very specific here to pass very progressive laws. And in some cases, those laws are stopped by the Spanish government because they take them systematically to court. I just mentioned one example, but for instance, there's a second example I can share with you. In the past, we suggested that from our public budget, we could have a fund to complete a minimum retirement pension to amount to 1,400 euros. That would be a minimum, right? And for those who don't reach that amount, we can pay a small benefit that would help them. So we came to an agreement with the PNV, Nationalist Party, that is center-right, and they told us that's not possible because the Spanish Constitution doesn't allow us to. In yesterday's agreement with PSOE and Podemos, for instance, we added a point, an item concerning indebtment, because we all assume that indebtment is necessary to move forward. So we included in that agreement that's fine, okay, but you can't really include the same indebtment level at all levels at a national level in Spain, because there are many different situations. So the agreement is that, okay, we defend indebtment. So what we want is to have that right and to say, okay, we're going to be deciding the indebtment rate we have in the Basque Country. That's what we included in the agreement. We'll see if that is respected or not, implemented or not. For us to be part of this or supporting the Spanish government, we're not getting many benefits because we're very limited to pass this type of laws on housing, on retirement pensions, etc., etc. And that is somehow limiting our power, so to say. And let me finish by saying that we are not nationalists, we're pro-independence, and to us, sovereignty is very clearly explained to people. It's very simple, really. Who decides what? And among who are these things going to be decided? These are three main questions to us. We think that we all need to make decisions together about everything. This is not about independence, yes or no, right? It's much more than that. Thank you, Arnaldo. There's also a question of someone who says that there's been a rise in far-right positions and many people are supporting the far-right party Vox, mainly at the Spanish national state. And some people are linking that to nationalism in the Basque Country and Catalonia. So the question is whether with an increase in unemployment rate in the Basque Country, for instance, are we going to be having many unemployed people? And is that going to be helping far-right policies being implemented? Well, we, I think, are lucky in the Basque Country because we are fully aware that we are anti-fascist. And we, in the Basque Country, there's not much support to far-right parties. Although in Navarre, we do have a right-wing party. In Spain, in the Spanish state, in the past, there was a transition when Franco died, and there was a high toll that was paid then. There was impunity for Franco supporters. There was impunity for the people that supported the dictatorship at all levels, the media, economy, etc., etc. And so there was a new political party that was created at the time and was made up of those individuals. So Vox, this political party's ideology, was always there. It was always present in Spain. So if we don't do what we have to do from the left, they will do it. And I think there's something that's very relevant psychologically. There is uncertainty. Neoliberalism has led to this situation that has created huge uncertainty. People don't know if they're going to be having a job, if they're going to get ill. So what are we people looking for? Certainty. And far right gives us a false sense of certainty, leadership, order. But I think that from the left, we need to carry out a reflection. And I guarantee that there is an orderly alternative that is possible. And that's what we need to go for. I insist, if we don't cover that space, they will. And to me, that would be a very difficult situation. Yes, there's one more question that may be more related to economic decisions that need to be made to face the pandemic. Will the European Central Bank support minimum income to face this situation and to help us go back to the previous economic level? Well, I think that I'm very skeptical about that too, honestly. I think that this is a hard time. I think that in the economic field, people are concerned. And right now, I think there's a crisis that's not financial. There is a supply and demand crisis, an imbalance. I mentioned earlier on the Keynesian model that will help, may help us move forward and set into motion again. it's surprising to see that Financial Times is supporting this idea. It's also surprising to see that they're going to be nationalizing all huge corporations. Well, but this is all tricky. This could only be temporary. Whenever they can, they will go back to the previous situation. So we need to take solid steps forward that cannot be reversed later on. One of the problems of the left is that if we don't do things with the people, if we don't create a new meaning to all of us, if we don't set a line saying, okay, in order to live a decent life, we are entitled, all of us, to many things, to certain things in Europe, both in Europe and globally, then we will go back to where we were. I mentioned earlier that sometimes in life you win, sometimes you lose, but we need to learn. But they will never learn if we don't make them learn. They will go back to the previous situation because that's what we want. That's the only thing they know about. I'm not just talking about one measure. Many measures need to be made. But who is going to be supporting or guaranteeing that those measures will continue in the future? There needs to be some pressure there. We need to have common projects, etc., etc. Let's be very careful here because we think that things have changed very much, but we tend to forget things very easily. One of the main features of the situation is that things happen very fast, very, very fast. And now we can think that in this situation of shock, we've seen the light, but we can forget all this very easily. And this is why I think we need to be very, very careful here. And we need to say that things are very simple. The world is based on the interest and of the people, of the individuals, right? Or it could be based on money. You need to make a choice between both. I think that the mission of the left is to support people make the right choice, is to tell people that there is a different way of doing things. And if we don't walk down that path, we're going to be back to the beginning. There will be social control. There will be fear due to unemployment, climate change, etc., etc. And they will take us to the previous model. And this is something that cannot happen. So things need to be presented to the people in a very, very simple way. We have an opportunity here. I think that now people are more open-minded, and let's make the most of that situation and tell them there are two possibilities, life or money. I think we still have time for a couple of questions, so let's go for them. These are new questions I've taken from the Q&A. Elena at the beginning asked a question and mentioned health workers. She said that most of those workers are women, and this is something that we have very clear in our minds. We now support them. We see that every afternoon we went out to our balconies and applauded and showed our support to them. What do you think are the measures that need to be taken to support them? Well, in all three Basque provinces and in Navarre, we have very clear data about that. And I know many people that work in the public health service, people that have been coping with precarious situation, people that have one-day contracts. And they have been at the forefront of this pandemic, and they are still having precarious situations. So they have been asked to make a huge effort. And it's fine to applaud them. It's fine to support them. But together with all that support, we need to make a reflection. We need to think about them. If you look at animals, there are like millions of viruses out there. We are eco-predators as humans. And so we can be getting an illness that comes from animals because there is contact between us. This is something that has happened now, but it will happen again in the future. Have we learned something? And if there is something we've learned, is that we cannot face this individually, but collectively, as a group. We need to have a strong public health service. And for that, we need to provide decent conditions to all those workers. We need to go for research. And there's something we need to take into consideration. When there was a lack of masks, we, being an industrial country, we didn't have the chance to make masks. And what happened here is that in China, some machines were built that were taken to the Basque country for us to be able to make masks here. But those machines were built by Basque companies in China. It doesn't make any sense, you know. So we need to place life at the core of this system. Care is going to be paramount, and we need to have a very solid, a very strong health service, because we need a strong health service. And applauding is not enough. I think it's important, but it's not enough. We need to be very aware, and I think we are now, that we haven't supported those workers enough in the past. And without them, this will not work. The world will not work without them. So we need to have a good plan. We need to struggle against precarization in primary services, health services. We need more resources. We need more resources placed on research. And the healthcare system reports to the public administration. So we need investment, we need decent working conditions, we need funding for research, and we need to have a strong public service, and we need it as soon as possible. Thank you so much. Let me ask you one last question. Some people are mentioning internationalism in their questions. This is linked to the European Union as well. And this is a very specific question. So we're part of the EU and we want to leave the Spanish state. Are these two things compatible? Are they compatible? Well, in technical terms, okay, if you leave a member state, then that member state will have the necessary resources to prevent you from being part of the EU. And in that sense, I would say two things. One, we need to think whether we want to be part of the EU or not. That's the first thing we need to decide in the Basque country. Are we interested or not? Do we want to be part of the Eurozone or not? That is a discussion that we need to carry out. Secondly, I would like to add something. Because quite often we hear that the independence project is based on rights, and that's true. But let's look at Catalonia and the Basque Country and Scotland. There are three different cases there. And in Scotland, in Edinburgh, they lost independence. Glasgow won their independence. And in Glasgow, normally they vote left-wing parties. There are many minds in there. In Catalonia, there was a process where people were moved towards the left. In the Basque Country, the left defends independence, and not just because we want to place our flag and that's it. No. The question is, who is going to make decisions? When will decisions be made? By whom? So we want to have a state structure to protect our people. We've seen that if you're not a state, other people will be making decisions for you. That's very clearly seen in Spain right now. So some people say that the globalization would bring about the crisis of the state. And that's something that's coming back to us. I mean, we've heard Spanish presidents saying that defending the national industry is not nationalism. And we say, of course, to defend the national industry is just to define it. What I mean by this is that in our opinion, we need to have this discussion, but we believe that we need to defend independence within the EU as well. We want to come up with a different Europe. We want to be part of the building process of that new Europe, and we need to develop different types of policies. And for that, we need sovereignty. This is why we defend what we defend. We are not nationalists, we are pro-independence. And not because we want to compete with the Spanish state. Yesterday, I posted a tweet when we signed the agreement, and we said, we have signed this agreement on labor reform. And there's a famous quote in the Basque country, which is very clearly understood, that what joins us with the Spanish state is that we want to have the same level. We want to be equal. And that is all about internationalism. We don't share a national identity. We share a class identity. And that is essential for us. Okay, thank you, Arnaldo. Thank you so much for these very interesting answers. I would like to thank the audience for the interesting questions. And now the hand is all yours, Walter.
Yes, there does not remain much to say after this exciting and very inspiring conversation. Thank you very much, Arnaldo, for your availability. And thank you also for your fascinating answers you gave during the interview and during the question and answer part to the audience. I really hope that we will be able to continue this dialogue, hopefully under better conditions and physically and in person. Now is the moment also to thank all those who have contributed to this event. I start with Elena, who represents Irazar also in the Transform network and who is a very close and dear friend to all of us. I want to thank Mariela Barquero, who is the interpreter, and without her help, we would not be able to communicate with one another. I thank Andoni Lariaga, who sorted out the questions and forwarded them to our interviewee. And last not least, I thank Angelina Giannocopulo, who was not visible. Actually, she's sitting in Athens, being the director behind the scenes and the manager of the whole project, Meeting the Left. As I said in the introduction, we recorded this event. We will publish it on our website in the collection of the other webinars. The next edition of our series will be next Friday, again at 6:00 p.m. with Manon Aubry, who is together with Martin Schirdewan, co-president of the GUE-NGL group, which is the group of the United Left, Nordic Green Left Alliance in the European Parliament. She is a newcomer in this post, elected after the recent European elections. I know her personally, and I'm pretty sure that it will be a very interesting and exciting conversation with her. You can already register with the link shown at the Transform website. And with having said this, I wish you a nice evening and take care and stay healthy. Bye-bye to all of you. Thank you.